Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so I usually don't do this kind of thing. Like, share personal stuff online. But this Hinge story is different. It's been messing with my head for months, and I kinda need to get it out there. Maybe someone else has had a similar thing happen? I dunno. Anyway, buckle up, because this is gonna get weird. It all started, super basic. I was bored one Friday night, scrolling through Hinge. You know how it is. Swipe left, swipe right, judging people based on 3 photos and a witty, or usually not so witty, prompt answer. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a burger with, maybe see a movie. Low expectations, you know? Then I saw her profile. Her name was, well, let's call her Sarah. Her photos were striking. Not like perfectly posed and filtered influencer striking, but more like naturally striking. The first one was a close-up, her face framed by dark, wavy hair. She had these intense green eyes that seemed to look right through you. The second photo was her hiking, somewhere in the mountains. She looked happy, like genuinely happy, which is rare on dating apps. The last one was a bit blurry, taken at night, maybe at a concert. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and she looked radiant. Her prompt answer was simple: looking for someone who appreciates a good horror movie and even better conversation. Okay, sold. I swiped right. We matched. Like instantly. We started chatting, and honestly, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. We talked about everything. Horror movies, obviously, but also books, music, our families, our dreams. She was smart, funny, and incredibly insightful. She got my weird sense of humor, and I got hers. It was easy. Too easy, maybe? We texted for a few days before I finally suggested we meet up. She agreed, and we made plans to grab coffee at this little cafe downtown. I was actually nervous, which is saying something. Usually, I'm pretty chill on first dates. But Sarah was different. The day of the date, I got ready way earlier than necessary. I showered, shaved, even though I didn't really need to, and spent way too long trying to pick out the perfect outfit. I wanted to make a good impression. I got to the cafe early and grabbed a table outside. I was people watching, trying to distract myself from the butterflies in my stomach, when I saw her. She looked even more beautiful in person. She was wearing a simple black dress and a denim jacket, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She smiled when she saw me, and my heart kinda skipped a beat. The date was perfect. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. We discovered we had even more in common than we thought. It felt like we'd known each other forever. As the date went on, though, things started to get subtly strange. She asked me a lot of questions. Like a lot of questions. About my childhood, my family, my deepest fears. I didn't really think much of it at the time. I mean, people ask questions on dates, right? But the way she asked them, it was like she was trying to piece something together. Then there was the thing with her eyes. Sometimes, when she was talking, her eyes would change. They would get darker, more intense, and it felt like she was staring right through me, into my soul. It was unsettling, but I chalked it up to my imagination. The most unsettling thing, though, was when I mentioned my grandmother. My grandmother had passed away a few years ago, and I was telling Sarah about how much I missed her. When I said my grandmother's name, Sarah's face went completely blank. She just stared at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. Then, after a few seconds, she blinked and smiled, like nothing had happened. "That's a beautiful name," she said. "Where did you say you lived?" I told her the town I grew up in, the same town my grandmother had lived in her whole life. A weird flicker crossed her face. After the date, she walked me back to my car. We hugged goodbye, and she lingered for a moment longer than necessary. "I had a really great time," she said, her voice soft. "We should do this again." "Definitely," I said, feeling a rush of excitement. As I drove home, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The questions, the eyes, the reaction to my grandmother's name. It all felt wrong. I decided to do some research. I know, it sounds creepy, but I had to know more about her. I started by searching her name on Google. Nothing. I tried searching her name and the town she said she was from. Still nothing. It was like she didn't exist. The next day, I texted her, try and play it cool. I asked her about her favorite horror movie, hoping to start a conversation. No response. I texted her again later that day. Still nothing. I started to panic. I went back to her Hinge profile, but it was gone. She had unmatched me. I felt sick to my stomach. Who was this woman? What did she want? I spent the next few days obsessively searching for her online. I even drove to the town she said she was from, hoping to find some trace of her. Nothing. It was like she had vanished into thin air. I started to think I was going crazy. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was all just a weird dream. Then, a week later, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I opened it cautiously. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of my grandmother. The photo was old, maybe from the 1950s. My grandmother was young and beautiful, standing in front of her house in our hometown. But there was something else in the photo. Standing next to my grandmother, partially obscured by shadows, was a woman. A woman with dark, wavy hair and intense green eyes. A woman who looked exactly like Sarah. On the back of the photo, there was a single word written in faded ink. Soon, I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that Sarah wasn't who she said she was. And I knew that she was coming back. I started digging deeper into my family history. I talked to my parents, my aunts, my uncles. I wanted to know everything about my grandmother. That's when I found it. An old family legend, a story whispered in hushed tones about a woman who had lived in our town generations ago. A woman who was said to be a witch. A woman who had made a pact with something dark. The woman's name? Sarah. According to the legend, Sarah had promised her soul in exchange for eternal youth and beauty. But there was a catch. Every few generations, she had to find a new host, a new body to inhabit. And it seemed like I knew who she had chosen. I contacted a paranormal investigator, someone who specialized in cases like this. I told him everything, showed him the photo, the texts, everything. He listened patiently, his expression grim. "This is serious," he said. "This woman, she's not human. You need to protect yourself." He gave me some advice, some rituals to perform, some objects to keep close. I followed his instructions religiously. I boarded up my windows, changed my locks, and slept with a knife under my pillow. I was terrified, but I was also determined to fight back. Weeks turned into months, and nothing happened. I started to think that maybe I was safe. Maybe I had scared her off. Then, one night, I woke up to a strange noise. A tapping at my window. I grabbed the knife and crept to the window. I peeked through the blinds. Standing outside, in the pale moonlight, was Sarah. She smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. "Hello," she whispered, her voice like ice. "It's time." I braced myself, ready to fight for my life. I was going to end this. That's when I saw something else. Behind Sarah, standing in the shadows, was another figure. A figure that looked familiar. A figure with dark, wavy hair and intense green eyes. A figure that looked exactly like Sarah, but younger, much younger. Then it hit me. Sarah wasn't just after my body. She was after hers. She needed a younger, stronger vessel to continue her cycle. She had been grooming me to take over her current state, and then she would move on to this new host. I was just a stepping stone. The two figures merged. Shadows danced, and the younger form stumbled slightly. Sarah looked at me. Sadness flashed in her eyes. She said, "You are my favorite host." Then, she turned and walked away, leaving me alive, but more terrified than ever. I still think about it, still have nightmares. I never went back on Hinge. I still get goosebumps thinking about it, and it all started with something as stupid as Hinge. I was bored, okay? Just out of a kinda lame relationship, and all my friends were coupled up doing couple-Y things. So yeah, I caved and downloaded Hinge. Swiped left on a bunch of dorks, and swiped right on a few that seemed normal. Then, bam, a match. Her name was Sarah. Her profile was pretty basic. A couple of pics of her smiling, one of her hiking, looked like Runyon Canyon, typical LA girl, and a prompt about her favorite pizza toppings being pineapple. I know, but I was willing to overlook it. We started chatting, and she seemed cool, down to earth, funny, like the same kind of movies I did. We talked for a few days, and honestly, I was actually looking forward to meeting her. We made plans to grab coffee at this little place in Los Feliz. I got there early, snagged a table outside, and waited. She texted me saying she was running a few minutes late. No big deal. I ordered a latte and just chilled, scrolling through Instagram. Then she arrived, and that's when things started to feel off. She looked different than her pictures, like drastically different. The girl in the photos had this bright, bubbly vibe. This girl didn't. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were dark, and she wasn't smiling at all. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Good to finally meet you." She just nodded, sat down, and didn't say anything. I figured she was just nervous. I mean, first dates are awkward, right? I tried to make conversation, asked her about her day, about her job, about her hiking picture. She gave me one-word answers. "Fine. Okay. Yeah." The silence was deafening. I started to sweat. Finally, I was like, "So, pineapple on pizza?" "Really?" She looked up, and her eyes were intense. "It's the perfect combination of sweet and savory," she said, her voice flat. "Okay, weird, but whatever." We ordered our coffees, and she just stared at me. Not in a flirty way, more like studying me. It was making me really uncomfortable. "So," I said, trying to break the tension, "what are you looking for on Hinge?" She didn't answer. She just kept staring. "Sarah," I asked, starting to feel a little freaked out. She blinked slowly, like a reptile. "I'm looking for connection," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Me too." The rest of the date was a blur of awkward silences and weird, intense stares. I tried to make small talk, but she just wasn't having it. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. After what felt like an eternity, I finally said, "Well, it was nice meeting you." She just nodded, stood up, and walked away. No goodbye, no nothing. Just vanished into the crowd. I sat there for a minute, trying to process what had just happened. I felt relieved it was over, but also really uneasy, like something wasn't right. I got home and immediately went to her Hinge profile. I wanted to see if I had imagined the whole thing, if maybe I was just being overly sensitive. But her profile was gone. Deleted. Okay, that's weird, I thought. Maybe she just wasn't feeling it and unmatched me. Whatever. I tried to forget about it, chalk it up to a bad date. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. A few days later, I was hanging out with my friend Mark. We were talking about dating apps, and I told him about the Sarah disaster. "That's messed up," Mark said. "Did you try reverse image searching her pictures?" I hadn't even thought of that. I found the screenshot I had taken of her profile and uploaded it to Google Images. The results came back almost immediately, and that's when my blood ran cold. The pictures on her Hinge profile weren't of her. They were of a missing person. Her name was Emily Carter, and she had disappeared 6 months ago. The last time anyone had seen her was near Runyon Canyon, the same place in Sarah's hiking photo. I felt sick to my stomach. I showed Mark the news articles about Emily's disappearance. He was just as freaked out as I was. "Dude," he said, "you need to go to the police." I knew he was right. I went to the police station and told them everything. I showed them the screenshots, the text messages, everything. They took me seriously. They opened an investigation. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective. They had found her. They found Emily Carter in Sarah's apartment. Sarah wasn't Sarah at all. Her real name was Melissa, and she was Emily's roommate. She had been obsessed with Emily, and when Emily tried to move out, Melissa snapped. She killed Emily and had been living in her apartment, pretending to be her online. But here's the twist. The detective told me that Melissa was catatonic. She hadn't spoken a word since they found her. She was completely unresponsive. They couldn't get any information out of her. Then, The detective said something that made my skin crawl. "We found something else in her apartment," he said. "A notebook. It was filled with drawings. Drawings of you. And underneath each drawing, she had written one word." "What word?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Connection," the detective said. You know how everyone always warns you about dating apps? They say it's a cesspool, a breeding ground for weirdos and catfish. Honestly, I thought I was too smart to fall for any of that. I figured, I'm a decent judge of character. I can spot a red flag a mile away. Boy, was I wrong. Dead wrong. It all started innocently enough. I was bored one Friday night, scrolling through Hinge, swiping left on the usual suspects. Guys holding fish, guys flexing in the gym mirror, guys who clearly hadn't updated their profile picture since college. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. No cheesy pickup lines, no bragging about his adventures abroad. Just a few candid photos. One of him laughing with friends at a concert, another of him hiking in the mountains, and one close-up that showed off his kind eyes and a hint of a smile. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore the city with. I swiped right without hesitation. We matched almost instantly. I was kind of surprised, actually. He seemed way out of my league. We started chatting, and it was like we'd known each other forever. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, our dreams for the future, our most embarrassing childhood stories. He even remembered small details I'd mentioned in passing, which was honestly kind of impressive. After a week of nonstop texting, he asked me out. We decided to meet at this cozy little Italian place in my neighborhood. I was so nervous that I almost bailed. I spent hours trying to pick out the perfect outfit, convinced that he'd see right through me and realize I wasn't nearly as cool or interesting as I'd led him to believe. But when I saw him waiting for me outside the restaurant, all my anxieties melted away. He looked even better in person. He had this easygoing charm about him that made me feel instantly comfortable. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories like we were the only two people in the world. We saw each other every weekend after that. We went to museums, concerts, and even took a day trip to the beach. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a boyfriend. He was kind, attentive, and genuinely cared about my happiness. I was falling hard, like head over heels. Can't sleep at night, falling hard. Then, things started to get weird. It started small. He'd forget details I told him, things he should have remembered. He'd get my favorite food wrong, or misremember a movie we watched together. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe he was just having a rough week at work. But then it escalated. He started acting distant, almost like he was avoiding me. He wouldn't answer my text for hours, and when he did, his responses were short and vague. He stopped making eye contact, and when he did, there was this strange, vacant look in his eyes. One night, we were at his apartment watching a movie. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was staring out the window, his back to me. "Liam," I said. He didn't respond. I walked over to him and touched his shoulder. He flinched, like he'd been jolted awake. He turned around, and for a split second, I didn't recognize him. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, and his face was pale and gaunt. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. He blinked a few times, and the vacant look disappeared. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, his voice a little raspy. "Just tired." I didn't believe him. I started to get this unsettling feeling, like I was being watched. I catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, or hear strange noises in the middle of the night. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was being paranoid. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Then one night, I woke up to find Liam standing over me, staring down at me while I slept. He was just standing there, motionless, his eyes wide and unblinking. I screamed. He didn't react. He just stood there, staring. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. "Liam, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. He blinked a few times, and then he smiled. But it wasn't his normal, warm smile. It was a cold, unsettling smile that sent chills down my spine. "Just making sure you're comfortable," he said, his voice low and smooth. I couldn't sleep after that. I stayed up all night, watching him, terrified of what he might do. In the morning, I packed my bags and left. I told him I needed some space, that I couldn't handle the pressure of the relationship anymore. He didn't try to stop me. I went back to my apartment and locked the door. I spent the next few days hiding, afraid to leave, convinced that he was watching me. I tried to tell my friends what was happening, but they just thought I was being dramatic. They said I was overreacting, that Liam was a nice guy, and I was just letting my anxiety get the best of me. But I knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Finally, after a week of hiding, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I went back to Liam's apartment. The door was unlocked. I walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment was dark and silent. I called out his name, but there was no response. I started to search the apartment, looking for any sign of him. In the bedroom, I found a shoebox hidden under the bed. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. Inside were dozens of photos, photos of me. Photos of me walking to work. Photos of me at the grocery store. Photos of me sleeping in my apartment. He'd been stalking me. But that wasn't the worst part. Underneath the photos, I found a small, leather-bound journal. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. The journal was filled with detailed descriptions of me. My habits, my routines, my fears, my dreams. It was like he knew me better than I knew myself. And then I saw it. On the last page, there was a single sentence, written in bold letters. I'm going to become her. I slammed the journal shut and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I reached my own apartment. I locked the door and called the police. They came and took a report, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. They said there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him, that I was probably just overreacting. I felt helpless, alone, and terrified. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the past few weeks in my head, trying to make sense of it all. I kept thinking about that journal, about that last sentence. I'm going to become her. Then it hit me. Liam wasn't Liam. I went back to Hinge and looked at his profile again. I zoomed in on his photos, studying his face, looking for any clue, anything I might have missed. And then I saw it. In one of the photos, the one of him hiking in the mountains, I noticed something in the background. A small, faded sign. I zoomed in on the sign and squinted, trying to make out the words. Pine Ridge Mental Institution. My blood ran cold. I remembered Liam telling me he'd taken some time off work to deal with some personal issues. He'd never been hiking. I'd never met Liam. He was a patient who had escaped Pine Ridge. He had completely fabricated his identity based on my profile. The police finally took it seriously. They searched his apartment, only to find it empty. He was gone. They eventually found him a few states away, living under a new identity, already working on replicating another woman's life. To this day, I still struggle with the fact that someone chose me, specifically me, to impersonate. It wasn't random, it was calculated. It makes you wonder about the people you meet online, how well you really know them, and if they're who they say they are, or if they're just living a lie based on you. I have to make sure all the doors and windows are locked extra tight after I remember this. It all started with Hinge, of course. Where else does a guy end up finding trouble these days, right? I was bored, scrolling through profiles like you do. And then I saw her. Sarah. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers, and a bio that just seemed normal. You know, nothing too try-hard, nothing too desperate. Just a simple loves hiking, trying new restaurants, and good conversation. Sounded perfect for me, I thought. I swiped right without even thinking twice. And she matched. Score, right? We started chatting, and it was actually good. No awkward silences, no forced jokes. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, our dream vacations. Even that one time I accidentally set my kitchen on fire trying to make ramen. She laughed, and I felt like I was actually connecting with someone for the first time in ages. After a few days of texting, she suggested we meet up. I was stoked. We decided on a cute little coffee shop downtown, the kind with the mismatched chairs and the overly priced lattes. I got there early, naturally, because I'm always early. I found a table near the window and watched people walk by, trying to play it cool. Then she walked in, and damn, she looked even better in person. We talked for hours. Seriously, hours. It felt like we had known each other forever. She was smart, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was refreshing. Too good to be true, maybe. But here's where things started to get a little weird. A couple of weeks into dating, Sarah started acting a little distant. Not cold, exactly, but just preoccupied. She'd space out mid-conversation, her eyes darting around like she was looking for something. Or someone. I asked her if everything was okay, and she always brushed it off, saying she was just tired or stressed about work. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but something felt off. Then, there was the phone thing. She was constantly on her phone, texting or scrolling, but she'd always hide the screen when I looked over, and she'd never leave it lying around. It was like she was guarding some top-secret information. One night, we were at my place, watching a movie. I went to the kitchen to grab some snacks, and when I came back, I noticed her phone was on the coffee table, face down. I'm not proud of it, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and flipped it over. The screen was black, but there was a notification. It was from an app one didn't recognize. The notification just said, "He's close." My heart started pounding. Who was he? And what was he close to? When Sarah came back, she saw me holding her phone, and her face went white. She snatched it out of my hand and didn't say a word. The rest of the night was awkward as hell. I tried to talk to her about it the next day, but she refused to answer my calls. I texted her, asking what was going on, but she just ignored me. I was starting to freak out. Was she seeing someone else? Was she in some kind of trouble? Was I being completely played? So, naturally, I did the only thing a slightly obsessive guy would do. I started digging. I searched her name online, trying to find anything that could explain her weird behavior. I scrolled through her social media, looking for clues. And then I found it. It was an old news article from about 5 years ago. The headline read, "Local woman disappears after hiking trip." The article was about a young woman named Emily Carter, who had vanished without a trace while hiking in the mountains near our town. Her body was never found. And the picture of Emily Carter in the article? It was identical to Sarah. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe Sarah just looked a lot like this missing woman. But then I noticed something else in the article. It mentioned that Emily Carter had a boyfriend named Mark, and my name is Mark. I felt like I was going to throw up. Was she Emily Carter? Had she faked her own death and started a new life? And if so, why was she dating me? I had to know. I decided to drive up to the mountains, where Emily Carter had disappeared. I figured maybe I could find something, anything, that would explain what was going on. I spent hours hiking around, searching for any sign of Emily. I found nothing. The sun was starting to set, and I was about to give up when I saw it. A small wooden cross, hidden behind a cluster of trees. It was weathered and faded, but I could still make out the inscription. Emily Carter, beloved daughter. I stood there for a long time, staring at the cross. I felt a wave of grief wash over me, even though I had never met Emily. And then I heard a noise behind me. I turned around, and there she was. Sarah. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were cold, empty. "What are you doing here, Mark?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I know who you are," I said. "You're Emily Carter." She didn't deny it. She just stared at me. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do this?" She took a step closer to me. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "He made me do it." "Who made you do it?" I asked. And that's when she pointed. Not at someone behind me. Not at some hidden figure in the woods. She pointed at me. "You did," she said. "You killed me, Mark. And now you're going to pay." My blood ran cold. I didn't understand. I had never met Emily Carter before in my life. How could I have killed her? Then it all clicked. The gaps in my memory. The strange dreams I'd been having. The overwhelming feeling of guilt that I couldn't explain. I realized that I didn't just look like Emily Carter's boyfriend. I was her boyfriend. I just didn't remember it. I had blocked it all out. The argument. The hike. The accident. I had killed Emily Carter. And now, Her ghost had come back to get revenge. Sarah lunged at me, her eyes filled with hate. I stumbled backwards, tried to get away, but it was too late. She pushed me. I fell. Down, down, down into the darkness. The last thing I saw was Sarah's face, smiling. I woke up in the hospital, bruised and battered, but alive. The doctor said I had fallen down a ravine and been knocked unconscious. They didn't know how long I had been there. I told them about Sarah, about Emily Carter, about everything. They looked at me like I was crazy. They checked my medical records. They ran tests. And then they told me the truth. There was no Emily Carter. There was no missing woman. There was no news article. It was all in my head. The doctor said I had suffered a severe psychotic break, triggered by stress and grief. I had created a whole elaborate fantasy to cope with something I couldn't face. But here's the thing. I still don't believe them. Because when I got back to my apartment, I found something. Hidden in a drawer, tucked away beneath a pile of old clothes. It was a picture of me and Sarah, smiling, hiking in the mountains. Okay, buckle up, because this is a story that still makes me check under my bed sometimes. It's not a ghost story, not exactly, but it's about something way creepier. How well you can really know someone through a screen, and how easily that image can shatter. It all started, like so many questionable decisions do, with Hinge. I was bored, fresh out of a kinda sorta relationship, and figured, what the heck? Maybe I'd meet someone cool. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a beer with, maybe watch a movie. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile was understated. A couple of decent photos, one hiking, another laughing with friends. No shirtless gym selfies, no boasting about his six-figure salary. Just a regular-looking dude with a nice smile and a bio that said he was looking for someone to explore hidden coffee shops with. I thought, okay, that's different. We matched, and the messages started flowing. He was witty, a good listener, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything. Our favorite books, our most embarrassing childhood moments, our dreams for the future. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe? But I ignored that little voice of doubt in the back of my head. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore downtown that had a little cafe inside. It sounded charming, and I was excited. I spent way too long picking out an outfit, trying to look effortlessly cool, but also like I hadn't tried too hard. You know the drill. The bookstore was exactly as he described, cozy, with the smell of old paper and freshly brewed coffee hanging in the air. I spotted him immediately, sitting at a table near the window. He looked even better in person. That initial awkwardness melted away almost instantly. We talked for hours that afternoon, lost in conversation. It felt easy. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Movies, concerts, picnics in the park. He was always thoughtful, always attentive. He remembered the little things I told him, like my favorite flower or the name of my childhood pet. He even surprised me with a vintage edition of my favorite book. It was like he'd somehow read my mind. But there were little things, subtle things, that started to nag at me. He never talked about his family. He was vague about his job, only saying he worked in tech. And he always seemed a little guarded, like he was holding something back. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie. I went to the kitchen to grab some snacks, and when I came back, he was staring at my bookshelf, his face unreadable. "You have a lot of books," he said, his voice flat. "Yeah, I love to read," I replied, a little confused by his tone. He didn't say anything else, but the way he looked at those books, it was like he was seeing something I wasn't. The next day, I decided to do a little digging. I know, snooping is bad, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started with a simple Google search. Liam. Nothing. I tried his last name, which he'd mentioned in passing. Still nothing. It was like he didn't exist. That's when I started to panic. I went back to Hinge, hoping to find some clue, some connection to his real life. But his profile was gone, vanished. It was like he'd never been there at all. I felt sick to my stomach. Who was this guy? And what did he want from me? I spent the next few days a nervous wreck, jumping at every sound, afraid to leave my apartment. I started having nightmares, vivid and disturbing. In one, I was trapped in a maze of bookshelves, and Liam was standing at the end, his face hidden in shadow. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and wait for him to show up again. I decided to confide in my best friend, Sarah. She listened patiently as I spilled everything, her eyes wide with concern. "This is insane," she said when I was finished. "You need to go to the police." I hesitated. I didn't have any proof, just a vague feeling of unease. But Sarah was right. I couldn't ignore this anymore. I went to the police station and told them everything. They took my statement, but they didn't seem particularly concerned. They said it was probably just a guy who wasn't who he said he was. Maybe someone who was married or had a girlfriend. I left the station feeling even more helpless than before. I was on my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent my heart racing. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a soft tapping at my window. I froze. My blood ran cold. I knew it was him. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The tapping continued, insistent and unnerving. Slowly, cautiously, I got out of bed and crept towards the window. I peeked through the blinds, my hand trembling. There he was, Liam, standing in the shadows, his face pale and gaunt. He was holding something in his hand. A book. He held it up to the window. It was the vintage edition of my favorite book, the one he'd given me. But it was different. The cover was torn, the pages ripped and stained. And written across the front, in what looked like blood, were 2 words. "I know." I screamed. I stumbled back from the window, tripping over my own feet. I scrambled to my phone and dialed 911. But as I waited for the police to arrive, I realized something that made my blood run even colder than before. He didn't know anything about me that I hadn't told him. The book, my favorite flower, my childhood pet. I had told him all of those things. And then it hit me. I hadn't just told him. I had written them. I was a writer. And a few months before I met Liam, I had started writing a novel. A psychological thriller about a woman who meets a mysterious man online. A man who seems perfect, but who is hiding a dark secret. I rushed to my laptop, my hands shaking. I opened the document containing my novel. And there, at the very end, in the last chapter one had written, were the words. He held it up to the window. It was the vintage edition of her favorite book, the one he'd given her. But it was different. The cover was torn, the pages ripped and stained. And written across the front, in what looked like blood, were 2 words. "I know." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. It wasn't him. It was me. I had written myself into this nightmare. I had created Liam. Or had I? You know how everyone's got that one dating app story that makes you want to delete all your accounts and swear off romance forever? Yeah, well, buckle up, because this one's mine. It's not like blood and guts scary, but it's the kind of creepy that gets under your skin and stays there, you know? I still get weirded out thinking about it. So, let's dive into this mess. I was bored, okay? Totally, utterly bored. It was that weird in-between time after graduating college and before, actually starting my life. I was crashing at my parents' place in this super small town, surrounded by cornfields and a whole lot of nothing. My friends were all off doing cool stuff in cool cities, and I was stuck babysitting my younger brother and scrolling through Hinge. I swiped right on basically everyone, just hoping for some kind of human interaction that didn't involve my mom asking me if I'd applied for any jobs that day. That's when I saw him. Ethan, his profile read. His pictures were intense. Not like trying too hard intense, but more like he was staring directly into my soul. All his photos were black and white, which I thought was kind of pretentious, but whatever. He was objectively good-looking, dark hair, sharp jawline, those eyes that could probably melt glaciers. His profile was super minimal, just a quote from some poet I'd never heard of and a single word. Writer. Mysterious, right? I swiped right, figuring there was no way he'd match with me. But then, ding, we matched. I was actually kind of excited. We started chatting, and he was different. He wasn't trying to be funny or charming or anything. He was just genuine. We talked about books and movies and our dreams. He asked really thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers. It was refreshing, honestly. After a couple of days of texting, he suggested we meet up. He said he knew this cool coffee shop in a town about an hour away, near this, weird abandoned factory. I was a little hesitant. Abandoned factory? Really? But I was also desperate to get out of my house. So I said yes. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent 2 hours trying to decide what to wear. I ended up going with a simple sweater and jeans, trying to look casual, but also like I hadn't just rolled out of bed. I drove to the coffee shop, which was actually pretty cool. All exposed brick and indie music. Ethan was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He looked even more intense in person. He was wearing a black turtleneck and staring out the window. He didn't even notice me until I was right in front of him. "Hey," I said, trying to sound cool. He looked up, and his eyes, they were even more piercing than in his pictures. "You made it," he said, with a small smile. The date started off okay. We talked about the usual stuff, our families, our hobbies, our favorite books. But as the date went on, things started to get strange. He kept steering the conversation towards darker topics: death, loss, the meaninglessness of existence. I tried to lighten the mood, but he just kept going. Then, he started talking about his writing. He said he was working on a novel, a dark and twisted story about a woman who was haunted by her past. He described the plot in excruciating detail, going on and on about the woman's pain and suffering. It was honestly kind of disturbing. "It sounds intense," I said, trying to be polite. "It is," he said, his eyes gleaming. "It's based on a true story." I didn't know what to say to that. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to avoid eye contact. Then, he said something that really freaked me out. "You know," he said, leaning closer, "you remind me a lot of the main character in my book." I laughed nervously. "Oh yeah? How so?" He just stared at me for a long moment, his eyes cold and unblinking. "You have the same vulnerability." I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to get out of there, but I didn't want to be rude. I decided to try to change the subject. "So," I said, forcing a smile, "what do you do for fun besides writing?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his eyes like black holes. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "I like to explore." "Explore?" I asked. "Like hiking?" "Sometimes," he said, his voice low. "But mostly, I like to explore abandoned places." He paused, and then added, "Like that factory we passed on the way here." My heart started pounding. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I saw that." "Have you ever been inside?" he asked. "No," I said quickly. "I don't really like abandoned places. They're kind of creepy." He smiled a slow, unsettling smile. "I find them fascinating," he said. "All those forgotten stories, all that history, it's all still there, waiting to be discovered." He suggested that we go check it out, just for fun. I really did not want to. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I made up an excuse about having to get home early. He didn't push it, but I could tell he was disappointed. The rest of the date was awkward and tense. I couldn't wait to get out of there. When we finally said goodbye, I practically ran to my car. I peeled out of the parking lot and didn't look back. I drove home in a blur, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with Ethan. He was just off. When I got home, I immediately went to my computer and Googled his name. Nothing. No social media, no published books, no mention of him anywhere. It was like he didn't exist. That's when I started to get really freaked out. I decided to do some more digging. I searched the coffee shop he'd taken me to and saw that they had recently opened a writer's corner where local writers could do signings and stuff. I looked at the past writers, and there was no Ethan. There were people with the same last name, but it wasn't him. This wasn't a super popular cafe, so the odds of him not being on that list were basically zero. I started freaking out because there was no evidence that he existed. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those intense eyes staring right through me. I kept imagining him lurking outside my window, watching me. The next day, I decided to go to the abandoned factory. I know, it sounds crazy. But I had to know what was going on. I had to see if Ethan was really who he said he was. I drove to the town where the factory was located and parked my car a few blocks away. I didn't want anyone to see me. I walked towards the factory, my heart pounding in my chest. The factory was even creepier than I had imagined. It was a huge, decaying building, surrounded by barbed wire and overgrown weeds. The windows were boarded up, and the walls were covered in graffiti. It looked like something out of a horror movie. I found a hole in the fence and slipped through. I cautiously made my way towards the factory, listening for any signs of life. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. I found an unlocked door and cautiously peeked inside. The interior of the factory was dark and dusty. There were machines everywhere, rusted and broken. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the floor was littered with debris. I started walking deeper into the factory, calling out Ethan's name. "Ethan!" I yelled, my voice echoing through the empty building. "Ethan, are you here?" No answer. I kept walking, my heart pounding faster and faster. I felt like I was being watched. Then I heard a noise, a faint scratching sound, coming from somewhere in the distance. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I listened intently, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. The scratching sound grew louder, closer. It sounded like someone was dragging something across the floor. I slowly turned around, my eyes scanning the darkness. And then I saw it, a figure, standing in the shadows. It was Ethan. He was standing there, perfectly still, his eyes fixed on me. He was holding something in his hand, but I couldn't make out what it was. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his eyes cold and empty. Then, he raised his hand, and I saw what he was holding. It was a knife. My blood ran cold. I turned and ran, screaming. I ran as fast as I could, my feet pounding against the concrete floor. I could hear Ethan behind me, his footsteps echoing through the factory. I didn't look back. I just kept running, praying that I could make it out alive. I reached the door and burst out into the sunlight, gasping for air. I ran towards a fence, scrambling over it as fast as I could. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. I peeled out of there, my heart still pounding in my chest. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything that had happened. They took my statement and said they would investigate, but they never found Ethan. They searched the factory, but there was no sign of him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I never saw him again. For months, I was terrified. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even leave my house. I was convinced that Ethan was still out there, watching me, waiting for his chance to strike. Eventually, I started to heal. I moved to a new city. Okay, so, listen to this, because it's totally messed up and I still can't really wrap my head around it. It all started, like, the dumbest way possible. I was bored, you know. Pandemic was dragging on. Everyone was stuck inside, and I was scrolling through Hinge, desperate for some kind of human interaction that wasn't my mom yelling at me to take out the trash. I'm usually pretty good at spotting red flags, but this one was camouflaged, man. Like expert-level deception. I matched with this girl, Sarah. Seemed totally normal at first. Her profile was like outdoorsy pics, laughing with friends, the usual fluent in sarcasm bio. Cute seemed fun. We started chatting, and she was witty, quick, and actually seemed interested in what I had to say, which, let's be honest, is a rarity on dating apps. We talked for a few days, and everything felt easy. You know how sometimes you click with someone and the conversation just flows? That was us. We talked about movies, music, our families. Hers seemed pretty normal. Mine is a whole other story, and our dreams for the future. She wanted to be a travel photographer, which I thought was super cool. I was just trying to survive my online classes and maybe, learn to play guitar. Anyway, after a week of chatting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this hiking trail just outside of town. It's pretty popular, usually packed on weekends, but she said she knew a less crowded spot. I was a little hesitant. Meeting someone from Hinge in the woods felt like the opening scene of a horror movie, but she swore it was safe and that she went there all the time. Plus, I was stir-crazy and really wanted to get out of the house. So, Saturday morning, I drove out to the trailhead. It was a gorgeous day, sunny and crisp. I texted her when I arrived, and she said she was already there, waiting by the entrance to the less-traveled path. I found her leaning against a tree, looking exactly like her pictures. Even cuter in person, honestly. We started hiking, and the conversation picked up right where it left off online. We joked, we laughed, we talked about everything and nothing. The trail was beautiful, winding through these towering trees, with sunlight dappling through the leaves. It felt good to be outside, to be talking to someone new, to be happy. As we went deeper into the woods, the trail got narrower and steeper. We hadn't seen another person in, like, half an hour. I started to get that little niggle of unease in the back of my mind. So, you sure this is the right way? I asked, trying to sound casual. She just laughed. Relax, I know where I'm going. It's worth it, I promise. There's this amazing waterfall up ahead. I trusted her. Stupidly, I trusted her. We kept going, climbing over rocks and ducking under low-hanging branches. The air got cooler, and the light started to fade. The woods were getting darker, and the silence was getting heavier. Then she stopped. We were standing in a small clearing, surrounded by trees. There was no waterfall in sight. What's wrong? I asked. She turned to me, and her face, it wasn't the same face I'd seen in her pictures, or the face I'd been talking to all morning. It was blank, empty. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, like a doll's. You shouldn't have come, she said, her voice flat and monotone. It barely sounded like her voice at all. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the part where I ended up on a true crime podcast. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. What do you mean? I stammered. She didn't answer. She just stared at me, that unnerving, empty stare. Then slowly, she raised her hand. In it, she held a small, silver locket. Do you recognize this? She asked, her voice still chillingly flat. I squinted at the locket. It looked familiar, old-fashioned, with intricate carvings. Then it hit me. I did recognize it. My grandma had one just like it. Where did you get that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She just smiled, a slow, creepy smile that didn't reach her eyes. It belonged to my grandmother. Okay, that's weird, but maybe it's just a coincidence, right? Lots of people have lockets. But the way she said it, the way she was looking at me. My grandmother, she continued, her voice getting a little louder, a little angrier, was supposed to go on a hike with a boy, a long time ago. He stood her up, broke her heart. She never recovered. My heart started pounding in my chest. What was she getting at? She always regretted not getting revenge, she said, her voice rising. She said if she ever had the chance. She stepped closer to me, and I finally found my legs. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, branches whipping at my face, my lungs burning. I didn't look back. I just kept running, praying I could make it back to the trailhead. I could hear her behind me, crashing through the underbrush. She was surprisingly fast. Finally, I burst out of the woods and onto the main trail. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, got inside, locked the doors, and peeled out of there. I didn't stop driving until I was back in town, back in my apartment, safe behind locked doors. I spent the rest of the day huddled inside, trying to process what had happened. Who was that girl? What did she want? And what was with the locket? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside my window, made me jump. I kept replaying the scene in the woods, her blank face, her creepy smile, the locket. Finally, around 3 a.m., I got up and went to my grandma's room. She's been staying with us since her health started declining. I know. I should have gone to the police, but I needed to know more. I gently woke her up. She was confused and disoriented at first, but when I showed her a picture of the locket I found online, after countless of hours, finding a similar locket like that, her eyes widened. Where did you see that? She asked, her voice trembling. I told her everything that happened, leaving out the part about Hinge. I didn't want to upset her too much. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she started to cry. "That locket," she said. "I gave it to a boy a long, long time ago. We were supposed to go on a hike, but he never showed up. He broke my heart. I was so angry. I wanted to get revenge. I never did." That's when it hit me. The girl in the woods, she wasn't just some random crazy person. She was connected to my grandma. Somehow, she knew about the locket, about the broken date, about the revenge my grandma never took. I asked my grandma more about the boy, his name and everything. Turns out, he had moved away shortly after the incident and died a few years after, peacefully with his family. No trauma. My grandma was upset, but was glad that she did not take revenge, especially because he lived a good life. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. I started with Sarah's Hinge profile. It was gone, deleted, as if she never existed. Then, I tried reverse image, searching her pictures. Nothing. No matches. It was like she was a ghost. Desperate, I went to the library and started searching through old newspapers, yearbooks, anything that might give me a clue. I spent hours poring over microfilms, my eyes burning, my head aching. And then I found it. A small article in the local paper from almost 80 years ago. It was about a young woman who had gone missing while hiking in the woods. Her name? Sarah. The article mentioned that she was never found, but that she was known to hike often in that area. I was stunned, shocked, and afraid of what I found. That was not the end of it, though. I went back home to tell my grandma. She had passed away in her sleep. Turns out, all of my grandma's siblings and her parents died a few weeks before. I was too busy with life that I have not kept up. It was only after I told my mother. She told me that our family bloodline has been cursed, but it was only after the curse has been fulfilled. Then will the curse be broken. The only condition was that there must be a bloodline relative who must get revenge on the person. The curse, that my grandma had to get revenge on the boy. And me, going on a date with Sarah, had something to do with it. I still don't know how any of it is possible. But I do know one thing. I'm never going hiking again. I was supposed to go on a second date with another girl. I think I'll pass. I'm usually not one to believe in, like, supernatural stuff or whatever. I'm a pretty logical guy, I guess. But this thing that happened to me last year, it's still messing with my head. It all started with this Hinge profile, right? And even now, just thinking about it gives me the creeps. I was bored, scrolling through the app one night. You know how it is. Swiping left on the same old faces, looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. Then I saw her. Her name was listed as Willow, and her profile pic was different. It wasn't a selfie or a group shot with her friends. It was a picture of her standing in what looked like a dense forest. The light was weird, kinda greenish, and her face was partially obscured by shadows. But I could tell she was pretty. Like, seriously pretty. Her bio was even weirder. It just said, "Looking for someone to explore the unknown." That was it. No hobbies listed, no favorite movies, no witty comments about brunch. Just that one cryptic sentence. I don't know why, but I was intrigued. I swiped right. We matched instantly. I messaged her, something lame like, "Hey Willow, that forest pic is intense. Where was that taken?" She responded almost immediately. "Somewhere you wouldn't believe." That was the start of it. Our conversations were always like that, cryptic and unsettling. She never gave me any real details about her life. No job, no family, no friends. Just vague hints and unsettlingly poetic musings about nature, the passage of time, and the fragility of existence. I know. Red flags everywhere, right? But something about her just drew me in. Maybe it was the mystery. Maybe it was the challenge. Maybe it was just plain old loneliness. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about her. After a week of these bizarre online conversations, she suggested we meet. "There's a place I want to show you," she wrote. "A place where you can truly understand me." The place she described was out in the countryside, a few hours' drive from the city. It was a remote hiking trail leading to an abandoned old church. The whole thing felt like something out of a horror movie, but I was so caught up in the idea of finally meeting her that I didn't think twice. I drove out there on a Saturday morning. The weather was overcast, which only added to the unsettling atmosphere. As I got closer to the meeting point, the GPS signal started to get wonky. My phone kept losing service, and the road got narrower and bumpier. By the time I reached the trailhead, I was completely alone. I parked the car and got out, taking a deep breath of the damp, earthy air. The forest was eerily silent. No birds chirping, no squirrels scampering, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. I started walking down the trail. It was overgrown and barely visible, like no one had used it in years. The trees were tall and imposing, their branches intertwined overhead, blocking out most of the light. The further I walked, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. After about an hour, I saw it in the distance, the abandoned church. It was even more dilapidated than I had imagined. The stone walls were crumbling, the roof was partially collapsed, and the windows were empty sockets staring out into the forest. It looked like something out of a nightmare. Willow was standing in front of the church, waiting for me. She was even more beautiful in person than she was in her picture. She had long, dark hair that cascaded down her back, and piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through me. She was wearing a long, flowing dress that looked like it was made of leaves and vines. "You came," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Of course," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You said you wanted to show me something." She smiled a slow, enigmatic smile. "I did. Follow me." She led me inside the church. The interior was even more ruined than the exterior. The altar was overturned. The pews were splintered and scattered, and the walls were covered in graffiti. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Willow walked to the center of the church and turned to face me. "This place," she said, "is a reflection of my soul." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, staring at her. "I'm not like other people," she continued. "I'm connected to this place, to the earth. I can feel the energy of the forest, the whispers of the wind, the heartbeat of the world." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I brought you here because I wanted you to understand me, to see the world through my eyes." Then she opened her eyes and looked at me, her gaze intense. "I want you to stay here with me, to become one with this place, with me." That's when the fear really kicked in. I realized that this wasn't just some quirky date. This was something else entirely. This woman was not right. I stammered, "I don't know, Willow. I need to think about it." She frowned. "There's nothing to think about. This is your destiny." She took a step towards me, and I instinctively recoiled. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "You'll be happy here. We'll be happy here together." I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, back down the trail, towards the car. I could hear her calling after me, her voice echoing through the trees, but I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached the car. I jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced back at the church. Willow was standing in front of it, watching me. Her eyes were burning with anger. I drove back to the city as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. When I got home, I immediately deleted the Hinge app and blocked Willow's number. I didn't want anything to do with her, or with that place, ever again. I tried to forget about the whole thing, to chalk it up to a bizarre one-off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. I started having nightmares, vivid dreams of the abandoned church, of Willow's piercing green eyes, of the forest closing in around me. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that I had seen Willow standing at the foot of my bed. I turned on the light, but she was gone. I told myself it was just a dream, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, watching me. A few weeks later, I was talking to a friend about the experience. He listened patiently, then said, "You know, that sounds a lot like something that happened to my uncle. He went missing about a year ago, out in the countryside. They never found his body, but they did find his car parked near an old hiking trail. It led to an abandoned church." My blood ran cold. "What was the name of the church?" I asked, my voice trembling. He paused, trying to remember. "I think it was called St. Willow's." That's when I knew. It wasn't just a random encounter. It was something much bigger, much more sinister. Willow wasn't just some weird girl on a dating app. She was something else entirely. I haven't been able to sleep properly since. I keep looking over my shoulder, expecting to see her. I know she's still out there, waiting for me. And I have a feeling that she won't give up until she gets what she wants. But the real kicker? The truly messed up part? I decided to do some digging, some online sleuthing, trying to find anything about St. Willow's Church. I found a forum, a local history group, and someone had posted a picture of the church from the early 1900s. Guess who was standing in front of it, looking exactly the same? Willow. And beneath the picture, someone had commented, "That's old Maggie. They say she's been living in those woods for centuries. Folks say she lures young men to their doom." So yeah, dating apps. Never again. The next day I got a message from Hinge. They said that someone reported my profile and they were taking it down for catfishing. I was shocked to see that a profile used my face with the name. Explore the unknown. It was Willow. Let me tell you about Sarah. It all started with a stupid swipe. I was bored, scrolling through Hinge on a Sunday afternoon. You know, the kind where you're already dreading Monday, and the highlight of your day is deciding whether to order pizza or Chinese. Then I saw her profile. Sarah. She had this quirky smile in all her pictures, like she knew a secret you didn't. Her bio was short and sweet, looking for someone to explore abandoned places with. Now, I'm not usually one for exploring anything more dangerous than the fridge after midnight, but something about her profile just grabbed me. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Her messages were equally intriguing. Not the usual, "Hey, what's up?" stuff. She asked me about my favorite urban legend and if I believed in ghosts. It was weird, sure, but also kind of refreshing. We chatted for a few days, and I found myself actually looking forward to her messages. She proposed our first date, exploring an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. Now I'm no idiot. I knew this was probably a terrible idea. My friends would have called me insane. But that quirky smile of hers was stuck in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this could be something different. So, against my better judgment, I said yes. The hospital was even creepier in person than I imagined. It was a massive, Gothic-looking building with broken windows and overgrown vines crawling up its walls. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and decay. We parked down the road and climbed over a rusty fence, Sarah leading the way with a flashlight and a mischievous glint in her eyes. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule of despair. Rusty medical equipment lay scattered around. Old patient records were strewn across the floor, and the walls were covered in graffiti and peeling paint. Sarah seemed to know the place like the back of her hand, navigating the dark corridors with ease. We explored the old operating rooms, the psychiatric ward, and even the morgue. The whole time, Sarah was telling me stories about the hospital's history, the patients who had died there, and the rumors of paranormal activity. I tried to play it cool, but I was definitely getting creeped out. At one point, we found ourselves in what looked like an old chapel. The stained glass windows were shattered, and the altar was covered in dust. Sarah stopped and turned to me, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "This is where they used to perform exorcisms," she whispered. "They say you can still hear the screams sometimes." I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the sudden chill that ran down my spine. We stood there in silence for a moment, listening to the wind whistling through the broken windows. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled scream coming from somewhere deep inside the building. I jumped, grabbing Sarah's arm. "Did you hear that?" She just smiled. "Maybe it's just the wind." We continued exploring, the screams getting louder and more frequent. I was starting to freak out, but Sarah seemed unfazed. She just kept leading me deeper and deeper into the hospital's labyrinthine corridors. Finally, we reached a dead end, a small, windowless room with a single metal door. Sarah stopped and turned to me, her smile gone. Her eyes were now cold and distant. "This is it," she said. "This is where it all happened." "Where what happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a key from her pocket and unlocked the metal door. Inside, the room was completely empty except for a single chair in the center. The air was thick with a strange, metallic smell. "Sit down," Sarah said, her voice now flat and emotionless. What? Why? Just sit down, she repeated, her eyes fixed on mine. I hesitated for a moment, but something about her demeanor made me obey. I sat down in the chair, and as soon as I did, I felt a pair of cold hands grab my wrists and ankles. I looked up and saw two figures emerge from the shadows, their faces obscured by masks. They started strapping me into the chair, tightening the restraints until they cut into my skin. Sarah, what is this? What's going on? I yelled, my voice filled with panic. She stepped forward, her face now illuminated by the flashlight. She was holding a syringe filled with a dark, viscous liquid. Don't worry, she said, her voice now soft and soothing. This will all be over soon. Over? What are you going to do to me? She smiled again, that same quirky smile I had seen in her pictures. I'm going to show you what it's like to be one of them. As she moved to inject me, I thrashed against the restraints, screaming for help. But it was no use. The figures held me down, and Sarah plunged the needle into my arm. The world started to spin, and my vision blurred. I felt a burning sensation spreading through my veins, followed by an overwhelming sense of dread. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. Then, I woke up. I was lying in my bed, the sun streaming through the window. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. It had all been a dream, a horrible, terrifying dream. I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and splashed some water on my face. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something strange. My eyes. They were different, colder, more distant. I went to my computer and checked my Hinge profile. Sarah's profile was gone, disappeared, like she never existed. Then I looked at my bio. It now read, looking for someone to explore abandoned places with. And that's when I knew it wasn't just a dream. It was a recruitment. I was the new Sarah. And somewhere, another unsuspecting soul was about to swipe right. And the worst part? I was actually kind of excited to plan our first date. This abandoned hospital really does the trick. Okay, so listen up. You won't believe what happened to me last summer. Seriously, I'm still messed up about it. It all started with Hinge, like most stupid decisions do, right? I thought I was just trying to find a cool chick to hang with. Maybe catch a movie. You know, normal stuff. But what I got was, well, let me just tell you. It was late June, humid as hell even at night. I was bored out of my skull, scrolling through profiles, half-heartedly swiping right. Then I saw her. Sarah. Her pictures were different. Not professionally done, or overly posed, but like candid shots of her just living her life. One was her hiking in the mountains. Another was her laughing with friends at some outdoor cafe. She looked real, you know. And her bio just said, looking for someone who appreciates a good sunset and even better conversation. Corny, I know, but something about it clicked. I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. And then the messages started. At first, it was all pretty standard. What do you do? What kind of music are you into? She was a photographer, loved old film cameras, and listened to bands I'd never even heard of. She seemed cool, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. I was hooked. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this place called the Willow Creek Cafe out in the countryside. It was a bit of a drive, but I figured, what the hell? Maybe it would be worth it. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear, and kept checking my hair in the mirror. When I finally pulled up to the cafe, I was surprised. It was even more secluded than I imagined. Nestled in a small clearing, surrounded by trees. It looked like something out of a movie. I went inside and immediately spotted Sarah. She was sitting at a table by the window, sipping what looked like iced tea. She looked even better in person. Her eyes were this crazy shade of green, and she had this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. The date started off great. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She told me about her passion for photography, and showed me some of her work on her phone. Her pictures were amazing, capturing these small, intimate moments that most people would miss. I told her about my job, my friends, my stupid hobbies. She listened intently, asking questions and laughing at my jokes. As the sun began to set, the cafe emptied out. The waitress came over and asked if we wanted anything else. We both shook our heads. The air was thick with anticipation. I could feel myself falling for her hard. Then, things started to get weird. Sarah started acting different. She became quiet, almost withdrawn. She kept glancing out the window, as if she was expecting someone. I asked her if everything was okay. She just smiled weakly and said she was fine, just tired. But I could tell something was wrong. Her eyes darted around the room, never settling on anything for more than a second. Her hands were fidgeting in her lap. She looked scared. I tried to lighten the mood, telling her a funny story about something that happened at work. But she didn't laugh. She just stared at me blankly. "Sarah, seriously, what's going on?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. She took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, antique-looking box. It was made of dark wood and intricately carved with strange symbols. "What is that?" I asked, feeling a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "It's complicated," she said. "I can't explain it here. But I need you to come with me. I need to show you something at my place." I hesitated. This was all happening too fast. I barely knew this girl. But something about her eyes, the urgency in her voice, made me want to trust her. "Okay," I said. "I'll go with you." Her apartment was even more secluded than the cafe. It was located in an old farmhouse, miles away from the nearest town. As we drove down the long, winding driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. When we got to the house, she unlocked the door and led me inside. The place was dimly lit and filled with antique furniture. It felt cold and sterile, like no one had lived there in years. She led me down a long hallway to a room at the end. She opened the door, and I gasped. The room was filled with photographs, hundreds of them, covering every wall, every surface. And every single photograph was of me. Pictures of me walking down the street. Pictures of me at work. Pictures of me sleeping in my bed. Pictures of me doing the most mundane, everyday things. My blood ran cold. What is this?" I stammered, my voice trembling. Sarah didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at me with a blank expression on her face. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a knife. That's when I bolted. I ran out of the room, down the hallway, and out of the house. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove back to the city as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't sleep for days. I kept seeing her face in my nightmares. I reported her to the police, but they couldn't find her. She had disappeared without a trace. I deleted my Hinge account. I swore off dating apps forever. I just wanted to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I couldn't. The memory of that room, filled with pictures of me, still haunts me to this day. For months, I lived in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that Sarah would come back. I installed security cameras in my apartment and triple-locked my doors. I became a prisoner in my own home. One night, I was sitting on my couch, watching TV, when I heard a knock at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. It was a delivery guy, holding a package. I hesitantly opened the door and signed for the package. As I carried it inside, I noticed that the return address was familiar. It was the address of the Willow Creek Cafe. I ripped open the package and pulled out a small, antique-looking box. It was made of dark wood and intricately carved with strange symbols. It was the same box that Sarah had shown me on our date. My hands began to tremble. I didn't want to open it, but I knew I had to. I slowly lifted the lid and peered inside. Inside the box, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, sitting on my couch, watching TV. It was taken just moments before I opened the door. But that wasn't the worst part. In the background of the photo, standing behind me, was Sarah. She was smiling. Then I noticed something else in the reflection of the TV screen. It was me, standing behind myself, holding a knife. Turns out, Sarah wasn't the crazy one. Okay, so, you know how everyone's got that one dating app horror story? Like, the date who showed up smelling like old Jim's socks, or the one who spent the entire time talking about their taxidermied squirrels. Yeah, well, buckle up, because mine is way, way worse. It's the kind of thing that makes you question your sanity and rethink your entire approach to finding love online. Or, just rethink online dating altogether. It all started innocently enough. I was bored, newly single, and my friends kept bugging me to get back out there. Hinge seemed like the least terrifying option. I set up my profile, decent pictures, witty bio, the usual, and started swiping. After a week of mostly duds, I matched with this guy, Liam. Liam seemed perfect. Like, suspiciously perfect. His profile was full of hiking pictures. I love hiking. He listed books I'd actually read, major plus. And he even had a picture of him volunteering at an animal shelter swoon. Our initial conversations were effortless. He was funny, intelligent, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks, and things were going so well that I completely ignored that little voice in the back of my head that was whispering, "Too good to be true." We finally decided to meet up. He suggested this little Italian place downtown, a place I'd always wanted to try. He made reservations, which was already a good sign. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, wanting to look cute, but not like I was trying too hard. I ended up in a simple black dress and a denim jacket. I thought it screamed effortlessly cool. The restaurant was dimly lit and cozy, with the aroma of garlic and tomatoes hanging in the air. I arrived a few minutes early, nervously fiddling with my phone. And then I saw him. He was even better looking in person. Tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. He stood up as I approached and gave me a warm hug. The date started off great. We talked about everything, our jobs, our families, our favorite movies. He was charming and attentive, and I found myself completely at ease. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and I felt this weird, almost instant connection with him. He laughed at my jokes, and I laughed at his. We ordered a bottle of wine and shared a plate of pasta. It felt like something out of a movie. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He kept asking me really specific questions about my apartment. Not just the neighborhood, but the layout, the security, even what floor I lived on. I chalked it up to him being curious, maybe even a little bit protective. But the questions kept coming, more and more detailed. He wanted to know if I had a security system, if I lived alone, if I had any pets. Then, he started talking about my routine. He mentioned things I posted on my Instagram story, things that weren't publicly available. He knew when I went to the gym, what time I left for work, even what coffee shop I frequented. He phrased it all as playful banter, but it felt increasingly unsettling, like he was watching me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling of unease grew with each passing minute. I started to feel like I was trapped, like I couldn't escape his gaze. The rest of the date was a blur. I remember feeling increasingly anxious, trying to smile and make small talk while my mind raced. He walked me back to my apartment, and I practically sprinted inside the second he said goodnight. I locked all the doors and windows, triple-checking everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just a bad date, and I needed to let it go. But sleep wouldn't come. The next morning, I woke up exhausted and even more on edge. I decided to do some digging. I started with his Hinge profile. I scrolled through his pictures, looking for anything that might give me a clue. That's when I noticed something strange. In one of his hiking pictures, I saw a familiar landmark in the background. It was a hiking trail near my apartment, one that I frequented. I zoomed in on the picture, and my heart skipped a beat. In the distance, partially obscured by trees, I could see my apartment building. I felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror. He had been near my apartment. He knew where I lived. I immediately unmatched him and blocked his number. I considered calling the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. It was all circumstantial, based on a feeling. I decided to keep a close eye on things, to be extra cautious. For the next few weeks, I was a nervous wreck. I checked the locks multiple times a day. I avoided walking alone at night, and I jumped at every shadow. I felt like I was constantly being watched, like he was just waiting for the right moment to. I didn't even want to think about it. Then one day, I got a package in the mail. It was addressed to me, but there was no return address. I hesitantly opened it, and my stomach dropped. Inside was a single, dried-up rose. And a note. The note was short and simple. It read, "I know you're scared. Don't be. I just want to protect you." I nearly fainted. This was it. He was stalking me. He was crazy. I finally went to the police. I showed them the note, the picture from his Hinge profile, everything. They took my concerns seriously and started an investigation. They patrolled my neighborhood, and I felt a little bit safer. A few days later, the police called me. They had found Liam. He was living in a small apartment a few blocks away from me. They brought him in for questioning. But here's the thing. Liam wasn't some creepy stalker. He wasn't obsessed with me. In fact, he barely remembered me. It turned out that Liam's Hinge account had been hacked. Someone had stolen his pictures and his profile information and used it to create a fake account. The person I had been talking to, the person who had been asking all those personal questions, the person who had sent me the creepy note, it wasn't Liam at all. The police never found the person who was behind the fake account. They had covered their tracks too well. But here's the real twist. A few weeks after the police investigation ended, I was at my favorite coffee shop, the one that the fake Liam knew about. I was waiting in line when I overheard two baristas talking. "Did you hear about Sarah getting a restraining order against her ex?" One of them said. "Yeah," the other replied. Apparently, he was completely obsessed with her. He knew everything about her life. It was so creepy. I froze. Sarah, that was my name. The first barista continued. He even used her Hinge profile to catfish other girls, just to mess with her. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Standing behind the counter, pouring coffee with a practiced hand, was my ex-boyfriend, the one I had broken up with a few months before joining Hinge, the one who had always been a little possessive. He looked up, saw me, and his eyes widened. A slow smile spread across his face. "Surprise," he mouthed, and then he winked. "Okay, so check this out. You're not going to believe what happened to me last year. Seriously, it's the kind of thing you read about in some creepy internet story, not something that actually happens to normal people like me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It all started, like a lot of stuff these days, on Hinge. I was bored, newly single, and figured why not? I swiped around for a bit, matched with a few people, the usual. Then I saw her profile. Sarah. Her photos were striking. Not like Instagram model striking. More like intensely captivating. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and this smile that looked both inviting and a little bit sad, all at the same time. Her bio was short and kind of cryptic, looking for someone to share quiet moments with. Okay, a little vague, but intriguing. I sent her a message, something dumb like, "Hey Sarah, what's your favorite quiet moment?" She replied almost immediately, "Watching the sunrise over the ocean." Okay, poetic. I liked it. We started chatting back and forth, and things felt different. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't just flirting. It was like we were already on the same wavelength. We talked about everything, movies, books, our families, our fears. She was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. After a week of nonstop messaging, I asked her out. She said yes, but with a condition. She wanted to meet at this coffee shop, way out on the edge of town. "It's my favorite place," she said. "It's quiet, and they make the best lattes." I looked it up online. The Raven's Nest. It looked quirky. Lots of dark wood, old books, and yeah, definitely quiet. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I picked out my outfit like 5 times, kept checking my hair in the mirror. I wanted everything to be perfect. I drove out to the Raven's Nest, which was even more isolated than I expected. It was basically in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods. The building itself was old, looked like it had been there for 100 years. I walked inside, and the first thing that hit me was the smell of coffee and old paper. It was dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and bookshelves overflowing with dusty tomes. There were only a few other people there, all hunched over their laptops or buried in books. It felt like stepping back in time. And then I saw her. Sarah was sitting in a corner booth, bathed in the soft glow of a nearby lamp. She looked even more stunning in person. I walked over, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey," I said, trying to sound cool and casual. "Hey," she said, her smile lighting up her face. "I'm so glad you made it." We talked for hours. It felt like we had known each other forever. We laughed, we shared stories, we just clicked. I was completely smitten. As the evening wore on, she started to get serious. She told me about her past, about a loss she had experienced. She wouldn't go into details, but I could tell it was something that had deeply affected her. She said she had been feeling incredibly lonely, like she was drifting through life without any real connection. "I just want to find someone who understands me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone who I can share my life with." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I understand," I said. "I want that too." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I felt like I was the only person in the world. Then she smiled a genuine, happy smile. "Thank you," she said. "That means so much to me." We left the coffee shop hand in hand. As we walked to my car, she turned to me and said, "I want to show you something." She led me into the woods behind the raven's nest. It was dark, but there was a faint moonlight filtering through the trees. "What is it?" I asked, a little nervous. "Just wait," she said. She led me deeper and deeper into the woods, until we came to a clearing. And in the middle of the clearing, there was a small, stone cottage. "This is my place," she said. "I wanted to show it to you." The cottage was old and rustic, covered in ivy. It looked like something out of a fairy tale. I hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. She nodded. "I trust you," she said. "Come on." We went inside. The cottage was small and cozy, with a fireplace crackling in the corner. There were candles everywhere, casting a warm, flickering light. She offered me a glass of wine, and we sat by the fire, talking for a while longer. Then, she got up and went into another room. She came back carrying a small wooden box. "I want to show you something," she said. She opened the box, and inside, there were a few old photos, a dried flower, and a tarnished silver locket. "These are things that belonged to my sister," she said. "She died a few years ago." My heart ached for her. "I'm so sorry," I said. She smiled sadly. "It's okay," she said. "I just wanted you to know about her." She took the locket out of the box and opened it. Inside, there was a tiny photo of a young girl with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. It was Sarah, but younger. And next to her, there was another girl who looked exactly like her. "This is my twin sister, Emily," she said. "We were inseparable." Then, she closed the locket, and her smile faded. "She died in a car accident," she said. "It was my fault." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "We were driving home from a party," she said. "I was drunk. I crashed the car. She died instantly." I didn't know what to say. I was stunned. "I've been living with the guilt ever since," she said. "I can't forgive myself." She started to cry. I reached out to comfort her, but she pulled away. "Don't," she said. "You don't understand." Then, she stood up and walked over to the fireplace. She stared into the flames, her face pale and drawn. "I miss her so much," she said. "I wish she was here." Suddenly, she turned around and looked at me, her eyes wide and wild. "I have an idea," she said. "What if we could bring her back?" I stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She took a step closer to me. "I've been doing some research," she said. "There's a way. A ritual. It's dangerous, but it could work." I backed away from her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sarah, I don't like this," I said. "This is crazy." She ignored me. She walked over to a bookshelf and pulled out a large, leather-bound book. She opened it to a page filled with strange symbols and incantations. "We just need a few things," she said, her voice low and hypnotic. "A photograph of Emily, a lock of her hair, and a sacrifice." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "A sacrifice?" I stammered. "What do you mean?" She looked at me, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Someone who is willing to give their life," she said, "to bring Emily back." I realized then that I was in serious danger. This wasn't just a date gone wrong. This was something much darker, much more sinister. I turned to run, but she grabbed my arm. "Don't go," she said, her grip surprisingly strong. "We can do this together. We can bring her back." I struggled to break free, but she held on tight. "Let me go," I shouted. She laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "It's too late," she said. "You're already part of the ritual." Just then, the door to the cottage burst open. A tall, imposing figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. It was a woman, with long dark hair and piercing blue eyes. She looked exactly like Sarah. "Emily," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe. The woman smiled, a cruel, predatory smile. "Hello, sister," she said. "I'm back." Sarah let go of me and ran to embrace her sister. As they hugged, I noticed something strange. Emily's reflection in the mirror behind them was distorted, monstrous. It wasn't human. Then Emily turned to me, her eyes burning with an unholy light. "Thank you," she said, her voice dripping with malice, "for making this possible." Everything went black. I woke up hours later, lying in the woods behind the raven's nest. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the ground. I was covered in dirt and leaves, my head throbbing. I staggered to my feet and stumbled back to my car. I drove home in a daze, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? I didn't know. I spent the next few days holed up in my apartment, afraid to go outside. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept seeing Sarah's face in my dreams, her eyes filled with a terrifying madness. Then one day, I got a message on Hinge. It was from Sarah. "Thank you," it said. "Emily and I are finally together. We couldn't have done it without you." Below the message, there was a new photo. It was a picture of Sarah and Emily, standing side by side. They were smiling, their arms wrapped around each other. But something was off. Their eyes were empty, soulless, and behind them, in the shadows,